Hey friends, how's it going? So a quick lesson today where I'm going to show you the Beatles riff, the intro riff specifically to I've Just Seen a Face. Super fun one to play, and even if you don't know the song, you don't want to play the full song, this can be a fun little exercise to use. We're going to be exclusively on the first and third strings. I'm going to break it down nice and simply. I'm going to start with the chord shapes, right? Talk about how there's only 3 fundamental shapes you're using. Then I'm going to talk about how these chord shapes are sort of spread over the measures, each of which has 6 counts, right? Introduce this progression to you. And finally, I'll talk about the picking sequence itself. I'll talk about going between the third and the first string, and I'll talk about how to approach accenting this sequence, right, in each measure, the accent within the 6 counts, to give it a bit more of a sound that resembles what the Beatles are playing, which also just makes the sequence more interesting to listen to if you accent the right notes in a consistent manner. So the PDF chord sheet available for this lesson is available at my website, playsongnotes.com. It also applies to the full song, I've Just Seen a Face, if you want to strum and sing that song as well. So I have a separate lesson on the song, and this will cover just the intro riff, no capo, and with that said, y'all, let's get into it. Alright, so at this point, you've heard me play the riff, right? Now, let me show you this final tab. What we're going to do is work backwards, and we're going to end up here at the final place, but I don't want to start with this and sort of throw you in. I kind of want to simplify things. So we're going to take this full version, right? We're going to remove the picking sequence and then turn this sequence into this, where we basically have just the chord shapes being played once each, right? That's going to help you learn the order and everything. But even before this, we have to learn the chords themselves. So let's start with that. We're going to start with the chord shapes. Then we're going to move into the order that the chords are played. You can talk about that. You memorize that. And then I'll talk about the picking sequence and how to deal with the accented notes, because that's going to be a tricky part you'll want to figure out at the end, okay? So let's get into it. First of all, the chord shapes we're going to need. So I'll start with this quick diagram here. This is showing you a cheat sheet of the chord shapes, right? Now you can see that in this intro riff, we're all going to be on the thinnest string, the high E string, and then the third string, okay? So the first chord is actually an E minor chord just with the third string and the open first string. Now, for now, I'm going to be playing with fingerstyle with just my thumb and my forefinger on my left hand. And we'll go through each chord. Now, what I want to show you here is the idea that even though there are about 6 or 7 chords that are going to be used, they all derive from the same 3 shapes, right? And if we learn these shapes and we sort of memorize where our fingers go for each shape, that's going to make learning the different fret numbers that they're used on easier, because you know the shapes, right? And you can recognize which shape to use, which finger position to use, and it just makes it that much easier. So let's go through these one by one. So first up again is the first two strings you're going to pluck on the first chord are just the open third string, open first and open third and open first string. Now the next group of chords here, 3 different chords. Basically we're going to have. Now, just played like this, they don't sound like much, right? But what's going on here is there's a 1 fret difference between what the third string is playing, so this is 4th fret, and what the thinnest string is playing, that's 3rd fret, okay? So 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3. That's the first of these chords. The next one is going to be the same shape, just slid up so that we're on 9 and 8. Okay? And then the third of these shapes is going to be 11, 10. Okay, so these shapes, this is the first thing you want to learn, is just this one shape. Feel the consistency with your left hand, because it's one shape here, but it's 3 positions on the fretboard, okay? So this is the first shape we're going to use. And the second shape we only use for 1 chord. And if we go down to 9, 8 right here, this is a good place to practice transitioning into the second voicing, which is going from 9 to 7. So I'm basically taking my index finger here, and I'm going from 9, 8, to 9, 7. Okay, so this is a 2 fret difference between my middle finger and my forefinger on the 3rd string and 1st string. Okay, 9, 8, 9, 7. And then the final shape we have is when the 3rd string and the 1st string are using the same fret number. We're going to have that twice. One of them is going to be 12, 12. Okay, and then we're going to have 10, 10. Now, these are the 3 shapes. right? I've explained them to you. Here's the key part. As you look at my diagram here, is your left middle finger. And the way I'm playing these, right? My left middle finger stays on the third string for all the chords. This is the important part. So whether I'm on 0, 0, which means nothing, which uses nothing, or 4, 3, or 9, 7, or 9, 8, or 11, 10, or 12, 12, or 10, 10. This finger is on this string for all those. So that's like the constant. And then it's a matter of just using your index finger if you're going to do the first shape or the second shape, right? This is the first shape, and this is the second shape, which is a 1 or 2 fret difference, right? But if you're doing the same frets, then you use your ring finger right here on the first string. Okay, so I wanted to call this out. So this is a bit more nitpicky in the weeds about just finger positions, but again, if you sort of understand this when you're going into it, it makes everything else easier. So that's why I wanted to start with this. Now let's look at the whole sequence itself. So again, we're gonna look at measure by measure here, but we're not gonna worry about the picking, right? We're just gonna do a single pluck for each of the chords. So the whole thing starts with a walk down on 3rd fret from G, 3rd fret to 2nd fret to open, right? Boom, boom. And then there's a strum of the E minor chord. You can do that if you want, or you can just initially worry about just the 1st and the 3rd string. So the first measure would be, those are plucked once, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we go from 9, 8 to 10, 10 to 12, 12. And we do 12, 12 again. Then we go 11, 10, and then 9, 8. And then we end with a G chord, right? If you're playing the whole song, I've just seen a face, you want to come down to the, right? You want to come down to that regular G. But when you're practicing just the intro, I recommend basically ending maybe with this G, right? Open, 8, 7. This sounds more like what you're playing, right? It just makes it a nicer thing to practice. And this is a riff that, I recommend just spend time with it. Get your guitar when you're walking around or you're sitting on your couch or you're just noodling, right? And I'm doing 6 plucks for each one there, right? So that, again, is this sequence here. Get the printout at the website I have, right? And this sort of go through these shapes and look, you'll see in my diagram that I have the chord shape in like fret form above the tab. That kind of helps you, if you're a visual learner, visualize the fret space difference between the 3rd string and the 1st string, right? So again, one more time from the beginning, it's 0, 0, 4, 3, 9, 7, 12, 12. Then we go to the second line where it's 9, 8, 10, 10, 12, 12, and then 12, 12 again, then 11, 10, 9, 8, and then end with a G, okay? So if your goal is to play the whole intro, I recommend starting here and memorize this sequence, this progression. Play it enough until maybe you don't have to have it fully memorized, but be relatively fluent with it so that if you look at the printout, you feel like, oh yeah, that's this part, or oh yeah, that's this part. You want to get that good, because next what we're going to do is bring in the picking sequence, which gets a bit trickier. So the idea here is there's 6 counts for each measure, and the sequence is actually pretty, it's exactly the same for each measure. It's going to go from 3rd string to 1st string, and it's going to do that 3 times, right? We're going to do that on each measure with our right hand. So 3rd, 1st, 3rd, 1st, 3rd, 1st. And we're going to keep this going for the entire sequence. This is what our right hand is going to be doing the whole time. It's going to be staying in perfect time, in perfect tempo, steady rhythm, all that sort of thing. All that's going to be changing is our left hand. Okay, here's how I recommend practicing this. First is get good at just doing it on the E minor, right, with nothing. Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. used to that counting first and be able to do it steadily. Now, as far as the accenting I recommend, the first way I recommend doing this is you have these 6 counts repeating over and over again. If you don't have any accent, it just kind of sounds like it's aimless, like there's nothing that is taking charge, that's sort of setting the hierarchy to sort of establish the dominant beat, right? What we're going to do at first is establish that the 1 count of each measure is going to get the accent. It's going to be a bit more forceful. It doesn't mean it's going to happen faster. It just means it's going to happen with a bit more oomph to your ear, right? So here's what I mean by that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the idea is that's when the chord changes would sort of happen anyway in the song, even though this is a relatively sparse part of the actual song. But this is gonna accent the differences, right? Okay. And what you can do is you can get loose and sort of languid with the timing. You don't need to necessarily stay in the rhythm as long as you have an organic feel. Here's what I mean by that. So I'm sort of taking my time before I transition into the next phrase. But even in that world where I'm being a bit more loose and organic with it, I'm sort of playing it as 3 different sentences instead of just go, 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 unstopping, I'm still accenting that first count of each measure. Now, the next part, and this is optional, and this is more difficult, but I think this is really what gives the intro its full effect, if you can muster it, is accenting the 4 count also. So that's going to look like this, where we're going to accent basically, if we go to 4-3, we're going to accent the first pluck, and then the 4th pluck. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me play the whole sequence for you, and I'll do it pretty slow. But again, I think to me, this is what I hear when I listen to the Beatles version. Maybe this is one of those things that it's what I've heard the whole time, and I can't unhear it, and maybe this isn't happening. I totally admit that could be the case, but I think you'll find, if you indulge my little fantasy here, that this is what it sort of captures the sound of it, right? So here we go. Okay, I'll do the whole thing again. Let me count it this time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? So that's what I recommend doing. Now, a couple other things here. Again, going back to the very beginning, the very first part of the thing, you have this walk down. Here's how I sort of recommend doing this. You don't have to do it first of all, but it sounds cool because this is how the actual song starts. 3rd fret, 2nd fret, open. But here's the challenge, is that open low E string really is the first count of the first full measure. So what I do is whoops, well, I put my hand in the E minor position, number 1. I sort of pluck the thinnest 4 strings with my thumb, and then that strum of 4 strings, that's the 1 count. And then on the 2, so, right? One more time. You get the idea there, right? So that's how I approach the first measure if you want to do it that way. Now, the other thing I'll say is at the very end, if you're going to go and play the full song, I've just seen a face, I can't put that. That G that you go to at the very last measure, it's a real challenge to get there. I've just seen a face, right? You have to jump really far and enter a new way of strumming, and you're doing a full chord and start singing. So in reality, if you're singing it, I recommend basically in that measure that happens before the final G, it's okay if you basically want to dip out a little bit early. And by that I mean, you know, so I've just seen a face. So I basically played 1, 2, 3, 4, and then on the starting on the 4. All right, so the final couple measures. That basically makes the transition easier. And another way to play it too, honestly, if I was ever to play this, you know, solo acoustic somewhere, I would just approach the intro with a very much of a casual, you know, slower rhythm. I've just seen a face, I can't forget the time. Just a thought, right? You don't need to necessarily lock into that Beatles timing of. That's really hard to do. So hopefully what I've given you here will help you along your way. And the final point I'll talk about really quick is this idea of strumming. And specifically the challenge of, are you going to use the fingerstyle like I showed you of just doing that, or do you want to use a pick? Now if you use a pick, I'll say this. Basically, here's how I approach it. Basically, a couple ways to do it with a pick. One is to basically do a down pluck on the 3rd string and an up pluck on the 1st string. I recommend practicing this by itself, and the idea is not to get the 4th or the 2nd string. You know, if you get those strings, it's going to muddy it up, right? Okay, that's a bit tricky, but here's a trick you can do, is you can kind of mute the 2nd string by just leaning your middle finger into it, right? This gives you some leeway in that you can sort of accidentally strum and hit the 2nd string on either the down or the up strum, and it won't make a big deal, right? You also could sort of bump your middle finger into the 4th string. So I'm sort of I'm strumming all 4 strings here, but I'm only getting the 1st and 3rd strings because I'm muting or muffling the other strings. This is tricky to do though with speed and the precision and the emphasis and the sort of expression you need to imbue in this playing. So if you want to do that, that's fine, but you know, just know that with the pick it gets a bit harder. I have seen some lessons online where I was watching the Swift guitar lesson where he does a hybrid picking, where he's basically going to pluck like a hybrid in the sense of he's doing down strum with a pick, whoops, and then up, you know, doing the up strum with your finger. I can't really, I don't have any proficiency in that, so I can't necessarily demo that for you, but that's another option too. But basically, it's your choice. Another option is if you want to strum the song, you could just hold the pick in your hand. I dropped it, but hold the pick in your hand. Hold the pick in your hand, like literally palm it, and then just use your 2 fingers here. And then when you end it, I've just seen a face, I can't forget the time or place when we just met. Right? So anyway, hopefully that gives you what you need for this intro riff. Again, I wanted to sort of break this one down for you because it is such a fun little exercise that you can play the whole song without this riff, but you also can play this riff without the song, and it's a fun thing to practice. It's giving you these chord shapes. Which is a fun little thing to just have fun with the guitar on. So wanted to make this lesson for you. Hope it was helpful. Thanks to all of you who are supporting me on Patreon. I hope you found the chord sheet helpful. You can get it there at my website, playsongnotes.com, and check out my lesson for the full song, I've Just Seen a Face, if you want to learn that too. But otherwise, I'm going to leave you now. Take care, my friends, and I'll see you on the other side. Bye-bye.